There are 651 GameCube games, and I'm trying to beat them all while at the mercy of this horrendous wheel. Welcome to Beating the GameCube. Game number 13 is Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. Released in 2004, it was both developed and published by Konami. This is a remake of the first Metal Gear from 1998. With changes in gameplay, graphics, cutscenes, and voice acting, it's a very different beast. How did my first ever foray into the beloved series go? Let's find out. This is a very narratively driven game, about 80% of which is cutscenes and codec calls. I will be trying to convey the story in a way that makes sense, but leaving things out that I would suggest you do your own playthrough to enjoy. As a brief summary, we are playing as Solid Snake. Our mission is to infiltrate Shadow Moses Island, a nuclear weapons disposal facility. It's been seized by a team of genetically enhanced Special Forces soldiers, and they go by Foxhound. I am tasked with rescuing two hostages, the chief of the US government agency DARPA, and the president of ArmsTech. The only game mode here is the story, so I will be completing that. I usually play on the default difficulty, in this case that's normal. We see Snake covertly infiltrating Shadow Moses with scuba gear, and we're shown our first task, to reach an elevator guarded by a group of armed soldiers. There is also a mysterious character who accurately predicts Snake's plans. We'll learn more about him later. We received our first codec call now from Colonel Roy Campbell. These calls are a mixture of mandatory and optional. They provide our missions, tips on how to proceed, and a large amount of lore, most of which is missable. I won't be heavily detailing these, but there is almost 5 hours worth, which is crazy. I mentioned before that this is my first Metal Gear game. It's also my first heavily stealth-focused game, pretty much ever. As a result, it did take me a while to find my feet. This led to some early game frustrations while I figured out the controls and the general game flow. Enemies will enter alert mode if you cross their field of vision. This also pulls all nearby enemies to your location. At that point, the only way to return to the infiltration mode is to hide from or incapacitate all enemies. With no weapon, my only option here was to use melee attacks, and these are really weak. I spent a good 5 minutes messing around, working out the limits on enemies' FOVs, and getting used to Snake's movement. I started to get a better feel for the stealth mechanic, and I was soon using the environment to my advantage. There's a radar at the top right, and that shows the enemy's FOV as a cone. This provides a general sense of how to dodge them. Triggering an alert will remove the radar, and it won't return until that ends. After many blunders, I realized the best thing to do was literally nothing. I just hid behind a wall for the several minutes it takes the elevator to arrive. I waited for a good cycle on the guards, and then I had a clear path to the lift. I simply slipped in, and I'd finally cleared Baby's first stealth puzzle. 20 minutes? Oof. We got another of the 1 million pre-rendered cutscenes showing Snake getting battle ready and that mysterious man from earlier. Then with the title crawl finished, it was time to begin. We're introduced to Naomi, our medical advisor. She spends most of the game providing lore and puzzle-specific tips. There's also a Hind D Russian gunship that's sent to intercept Campbell's fighter jets. This gives us a distraction to try and enter the facility proper. This section is a wide open space, and I need to reach a ventilation shaft to the north to gain entry to the disposal facility. This is where the coolest aspect of Metal Gear became clear: divergent play. You can tackle areas in 100 different ways, and it's up to each player to find what works for them. I wanted the tantalizing item on the helipad, but I was too slow to avoid the spotlights, and that triggered my first alert. This pulled all available guards, and with no weapon, I was quickly overwhelmed. Next, I tried using the quieter eastern section. Guards will even react to your snowy footprints, and that's really cool. There's also surveillance cameras around. These have their own moving cones that also trigger alerts if entered. I finally made it onto the catwalk, but was soon spotted before I could access the vent, so of course, the whole place came down on me, and I game overed again. You can save upon entering each new area, so you always have a chance to retry each puzzle without fear of losing huge chunks of progress. I love this. Being brand new to the genre, I enjoyed and appreciated the focus on experimentation and iterative puzzle solving. Eventually I realized I could sneak through the vent in the middle of a firefight, which is really funny, and with that we were inside the tank hangar. I crawled through the vents for a bit, and I even saw some friendly little field mice. This revealed the next area I would need to traverse, the tank hangar, and it's swarming with guards. I also received a codec call from McDonald Miller, who Snake refers to as Master. He shows up a few times to give information on the local fauna and flora of Alaska. This is often a veiled metaphor for the broader themes of the game's story, so it's definitely worth paying attention to if you give it a playthrough. Now it's time for our third area, and easily the biggest yet. I waited until the legs of the roaming guards passed before exiting the safety of the vents. Now it's time to track down the hostages. Campbell says to use the elevator to change floors, and with that I'm left to my own devices to figure out how to proceed. A big part of this game is the finite resources. Snake cannot restore health without rations, weapons have limited ammo, and there are various tools that you can use to distract the soldiers as you explore. The coolest thing is that nearly everything is missable too. Don't explore a certain room, don't look in a specific locker, don't backtrack to a prior area. You might just miss out on a huge upgrade like a specific weapon or some sorely needed supplies. At this moment in time, I was running dangerously low on rations, and I was weaponless, so I was having a good poke around for any useful bits and bobs. This of course led to moments of triggering security cameras and being spotted by the guards, but I was able to reload back to my vent and try again while I experimented with new tactics and ideas. All in all, I was already really enjoying the experience, and as my first stealth-based video game, it certainly opened up my interest in the genre. After a lot of exploring and game overing, I found my first real weapon in the SOCOM pistol. Ammo is sparse and weapon fire can trigger alerts, so you're supposed to use them somewhat sparingly. I'm pretty sure the original game had no first person aiming, but in Twin Snakes we do, and it makes it a hell of a lot easier to target the enemies. I was still getting pretty wrecked regardless. Every time I thought I'd sussed the stealth mechanics, I had a new thing go wrong, and then it's game over and all the way back to my vent. Still though, these constant setbacks didn't bother me. I was always at fault when I triggered an alert, and each failure taught me a little more for my next attempt. I finally managed to retrieve the SOCOM, grab some ammo and rations, and return safely to the vent alive so I could set up a new save and prevent losing that progress. Armed with my new equipment and a much better understanding of the mechanics, I was ready to call the elevator and proceed with my mission to rescue the hostages. This led me to the holding cells, and I was told that the DARPA chief was within reach. It was time to rescue him. I climbed a ladder into the ceiling vents. On our way, we have a cutscene of Snake watching a guard relieve himself. Hey, nobody said this game isn't weird. A little further ahead, we see an unknown woman being held captive in one of the cells, but Snake, being the professional he is, proceeds further looking for the chief. At last, we found the DARPA chief, one of the three main parts of our mission. We learned that this being a disposal facility is all a cover-up, and it's actually for developing experimental weapons. While the imprisoned woman eavesdrops, the DARPA chief reveals the existence of Metal Gear.
He said it! He said it!
A walking battle tank that is nuclear capable. DARPA and ArmsTech were secretly working on a project together, but Foxhound have seized the island and pose a threat to the entire globe. Snake confirms that there is a safety measure built into the warheads called PAL, and the DARPA chief says we will need 2 detonation codes to disarm them, his and the ArmsTech president's. But a Foxhound member called Psycho Mantis, these names dude, can apparently read minds with psychic powers, and he's already extracted the chief's code. We're then given our next overall main objective for the game. Acquire 3 card keys that override the need for a password and can stop Metal Gear. We're also given the Chief's security pass. This will let me open any level 1 security door. We gain these throughout the game, unlocking new areas and encouraging backtracking for supplies. Before I can leave, the Chief starts asking oddly specific questions, probing Snake for information about his mission. Just as Snake starts to grow suspicious, this happens.
No. He had a cool voice.
Naomi says it looked like a heart attack, and Snake suspects that the Colonel is lying to him and that there is more to this mission than is being disclosed. The last bit of story for a while here, Meryl has escaped her cell and accuses us of murdering the DARPA chief. She also refers to Solid Snake as Liquid. You could probably guess the meaning of this along with the game's title. After a brief standoff, we're interrupted by guards. Meryl freezes and Snake calls her a rookie, so I need to defend us both. A bit of quick pistol action, and they were all taken care of. Some reinforcements arrive, but now Meryl helps me using an automatic rifle, and after several waves, we wipe them all out. As Snake tries to stop her from leaving, Psycho Mantis appears and makes Meryl attack us. Snake does some crazy Matrix-style dodging while she escapes, and then Spooky Mantis flies above us before disappearing. Now, that was a lot, and I apologize. I really want these videos to give you solid context of what is happening and why. This game just happens to be incredibly obtuse in many ways, and that makes it tricky. That was the last big story dump for a while, and I hope it's possible to follow what's happening so far. With the DARPA chief already dead, I now need to rescue the arms tech president, and as we learned, acquire the card key in his possession. I explored the armory floor, and this led me to acquiring a few new weapons, restocking all my rations and ammo, and just generally being in the best spot inventory-wise since I started this playthrough. I also backtracked through all the level 1 doors for more goodies. I even got the most iconic item of the series.
Alright, now we're playing Metal Gear, chat. Now we're playing. Nothing to see here, just a box. Alright, best game of all time.
The box, baby! While not completely infallible, as enemies will grow suspicious, it's just too fun being a cute little box running around and hiding in plain sight. Needless to say, I got a ton of mileage out of this bad boy. Now then, as much as I enjoyed this playthrough, it's time for the one bit I did not care for. I got totally and utterly stumped here. I needed to find the arms tech president on the armory floor, but no matter what I did, I was clueless on how to get to him. All the security doors were locked, so I spent literally an hour running around every area I had access to, having to fight the same dude over and over and over again, whilst looking for anything that might give me hints of how to proceed. If you have played this or the original, I'm sure you know the solution, and I had some folks in chat, bless them, who really wanted to help, but they respected my rules for the challenge. I don't think I've ever mentioned this before in the series, but I try to play these as organically as I can, just like when I was a kid. I ask chat to avoid backseating, I use zero guides, and I also do not exploit save states or any other advantages Kid Me was lacking. But holy dude, I finally had to concede and ask chat what to do, because I was well and truly lost. They told me that I needed to blow up a wall on the armory level with a grenade or C4 to progress. I don't recall the game giving me any hints to do so, and even once I knew what I was looking for, I still couldn't find it. It was a complete shambles, but at least we had a good laugh at my expense. Even when I found said wall, I still don't think it looked like much. Most games will have something like a crack on it at least, but not here.
Alright, that is not obvious at all, so yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that. Alright, thank you.
Alright. Funnily enough, we blow up another wall a moment later, and this one was way more apparent. Anyway, with that aggro done and dusted, it's time for our very first boss fight against Revolver Ocelot of Foxhound. I finally found the arms tech president, but he has been tortured and he's surrounded by a huge amount of C4. Ocelot spends some time flexing on me with his schmancy gun-spinning bravado, then challenges me to a gunfight with the president's life on the line. Drah! This is a bit of a weird fight. We cannot cross the C4 triggers, so we have to stick to the outskirts of the room. Ocelot runs around at very high speed, and he'll constantly shoot at me with frightful levels of accuracy. He can even bounce his bullets off the wall to hit me. This guy is cracked. I need to shoot him before he has a chance to fire each time he stops moving. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't played the original PS1 game, but I'm almost certain you cannot use first-person aiming here. That would make this fight significantly harder, as the third-person aiming in this game just straight up sucks. We, on the other hand, can aim directly at him, and that gave me a much stronger chance. I nearly had him on my first try, but he got one last shot on me just before I won. I ran it back, and this time had a much easier time since I knew what I was doing. Without too much hassle, Boss 1 was beaten.
You're pretty good. Just what I'd expect from the man with the same code as the boss. It's been a long time since I had such a good fight, but I'm just getting warmed up. What? My hand!
We get an absolutely bonkers cutscene now. The tower holding the president collapses, triggering all of the C4, and we also see a cybernetic stealth-suited ninja was the cause. Of course. Having lost his main gun hand, Ocelot cheeses it, and after, the ninja tells Snake he has no name, and they have a quite frankly outlandish fight involving slicing through rock, doing gravity-defying flips and kicks, and I loved every second of it. The fight ends in a stalemate, and the ninja uses his stealth tech to vanish, leaving us with the post-C4 exploded Kenneth Baker. Somehow he's still alive, and he tells us that he gave up his code, meaning that Foxhound has nothing stopping them from launching the nuclear strike from Metal Gear. What is interesting though is that he is immune to Psycho Mantis because of a surgical implant in his brain, and he says the DARPA chief also would have had the same thing, leading to the question of how Mantis could have killed him like we saw earlier. He also says that he no longer has the 3 card keys. We learn that Meryl is the Colonel's niece, and she took them to try and accomplish the same goal that we have. I'm going to need to contact Meryl, and apparently her codec code is on the back of the package. I'm also tasked with finding Hal Emmerich to learn how to destroy Metal Gear if all else fails. There's also some very low-res, real-life footage about nuclear weapons and the ever wider spread of them. A big part of Hideo Kojima's aim in video games is cinematic storytelling and exploring themes that can translate to real-life questions and consequences. I definitely recommend a playthrough of this or the original for yourself if you want to truly experience the story and the full depths of the narrative. Finally, we learn that the Cyber Ninja is an enhanced genome soldier created by Foxhound. Naomi seems to know more about him than she lets on, but we'll find out more about that later. Before I can leave, the ArmsTech president dies in the same way the DARPA chief did, and with his last breath, he curses the Pentagon for betraying him. He says that they are really pulling the strings, and they're just using Snake for... well, he dies before he can tell us that, but it's something alright. Hopefully I've made this all clear enough so far. Similar to Killer 7 from Game 5, this is a really difficult one to explain in a way that makes sense and doesn't take 5 hours, so I've done my best. I now needed to meet up with Meryl and get those card keys, but the armory is swarming with guards. I spent about 10 minutes here trying to grab all the loot, dodge the goons, and reach the elevator, but this was a tough section. My rations were low after Ocelot, so it took me a number of attempts to pull it off. Eventually, with some help from my best boy Boxy, I managed to avoid every guard and I reached the elevator. One thing I figured out is that I could spawn infinite rations in the holding cells by entering and exiting repeatedly, so I used this trick a fair bit for the rest of the playthrough. Something worth mentioning is that this game was way ahead of its time on the PS1. It has a tendency to break the fourth wall. To contact Meryl, I still needed her codec code, and I need to figure out what on the back of the package meant. Amazingly, this means on the back of the actual game box. There is a little picture of a codec call with Meryl, and that teaches you her code for use in the game. This is so cute, and there is a much bigger fourth wall break coming later that is one of the most famous aspects of the game. Thus, I manually entered her codec code, and with that, I was able to contact her. I still have a big smile on my face even now talking about this. I just love the creativity. Meryl fangirls a little bit here now that she realizes that she's talking to the legendary Solid Snake and realizes that we're not Liquid. I promise this will all make sense. And Snake flirts with her, calling her eyes beautiful. They flirt a lot throughout the game, so just imagine that happening, as I'm not going to mention every instance. Consolidating what we already know, this facility is a front for ArmsTech and the Pentagon to develop and test nuclear weapons. Foxhound, as a special ops group, were hired to guard it. Snake, Naomi, and Meryl all used to be members of Foxhound, but it has since turned rogue and seized the island and Metal Gear to make demands of the US government. We don't know all the details yet, but we agree to work with Meryl to find Dr. Emmerich and stop both Foxhound and Metal Gear. This will be the focal point of the remainder of the game. To meet up with Meryl and find the dock, I will need to access the northern half of the facility. Unfortunately, this is a much more heavily guarded area, and to access it, I need to traverse through a special gate that contains lasers, and if I trigger them, they'll release toxic gas. Fun. It's still a pain to get anywhere in this game, as enemies constantly respawn and supplies are limited. So just imagine that every time I go anywhere and I do anything, I'm having to fight or stealth around hordes of dudes, because I am. When I arrive at the laser gate, Meryl warns me the lasers are invisible infrared beams, and I would need to find a way to avoid triggering them. Then I'm left to figure out how to do that. On my first try, I just walked straight in, just to get a sense of where they are and what triggering one will do. That led to the door sealing and the gas being pumped in. Funnily enough, you don't even game over instantly, but instead you have to watch your oxygen deplete, then your health. Until now, I forgot to mention the game over sounds, which the game is infamous for, like this one.
Snake, are you okay? Snake! Snake!
As you can imagine, with how much I've game overed already, I heard these many, many times. There's a ton of these though, with all different codec characters having multiple versions, so I found them much more funny than I did grating. This time, I used a pair of thermal goggles. I'd picked those up while exploring, and this allowed me to see the lasers, however I did still need to dodge them. I found the camera perspective really clunky, but by taking my time, I managed to get through first try. A cool example of divergent gameplay here is that if you didn't find the goggles like I did, you could use cigarettes instead. Anytime during the game, you could just make Snake smoke, and that constantly depletes your health, which is pretty funny. You could blow the smoke to see infrared objects if needed, just a cool little thing that I wanted to mention. To access that northern facility, I'm going to need to traverse a huge canyon. I then received an anonymous codec call from somebody using the pseudonym Deep Throat, like during the Watergate scandal. They tell me that the canyon is covered in claymore mines and that a tank is going to ambush me. Fortunately, during my earlier exploring, I did find a mine detector, and thus I'm able to safely traverse the area. I haven't and won't be showing most of my item acquisitions during this video, but most times when I'm exploring on my way to new areas, I'm poking through every single locker and taking anything that's not nailed down. As warned, a tank was waiting for me, and this leads us to boss fight number 2. This time, I'm against Vulcan Raven, a huge muscular shaman raised in Alaska where the game is set. Just like many of the other members of Foxhound, Raven has supernatural abilities. He's able to commune with and control ravens. I found this fight significantly more challenging than Ocelot. My man has a giant friggin' tank, dude. Not only that, but my rations are frozen, so I was completely unable to heal during the fight. Bruh. I tried to be sneaky like a wascally wabbit and throw grenades at him, but he just ran me over with the tank treads and that one-shot me. This fight is insane! This straight up kicked my ass for a good 15 minutes. After all that time of getting pretty good at the stealth mechanics, they just throw me into a boss fight where I need to confront a tank head on. Why would Kojima do this? Still, as I feel about pretty much every aspect of this game, it's all a learning experience. I always have a recent save to fall back on, so it's not like I'm losing a load of progress when I game over. That allows me to try different approaches on each attempt and do a little better each time. This is my idea of solid gameplay. Things are tough, but never impossible. Deaths are punishing enough, but not in a demoralizing way. And you're encouraged to find your own way to handle the obstacles you encounter, with lots of other options on how to do each. By the 15-minute mark and several deaths, I found my groove and began to make progress. I had a good amount of chaff grenades saved up. With these, I could disable all nearby electronics, making them amazing for both stealth and combat. I used them to disable the tank. That gave me a clear shot at the gunner, operating the automatic gun. If I stayed low and close, the turret itself couldn't even hit me, so I just needed to watch my head for when he tried to run me down. This was all a slow, steady progress, but I was finally able to take the gunner down. Let's go! But then a second gunner pops up, and I had to do it all again. Classic, hilarious prank. Still, I just applied the same strategy again, and Gunner 2 wasn't too big of an issue, as long as I focused on headshots.
Those style points. You can't say better than the cutscenes, though. They are good. All three.
This game is so extra, and I love it. I love it! We retrieved a level 2 security card from the fallen gunner and used that to enter the northern part of the facility. We hear a call between Raven, Ocelot, and their boss Liquid discussing how to handle Snake. Raven says that he'll fight Snake again, and this time he will win. Ooh. So after that huge diversion, I made it to the nuke building, and I was ready to begin our mission proper. Retrieve 2 more card keys, meet up with Meryl, and find Dr. Emmerich to stop Metal Gear. Easy, right? After that tough boss fight, I was ready for something a little simpler, but nope, time for a tough stealth section. This area is teeming with nuclear warheads. As such, my weapons are all disabled, meaning I only have my fists and stealth to make it through. Furthermore, if I'm spotted, all the doors will seal and poison gas will be released in like earlier. So yeah, not great. On my second attempt, I made it all the way to the elevator successfully, but I was unfortunately spotted while I was waiting for it to arrive. Yeesh. A few more attempts using the left path led me to believe that this just was not the way to go, and thus I started taking the right catwalk instead. Unfortunately, I forgot to account for all the security cameras if you go that way. Whoops. Thankfully, on my fourth and final attempt, I used what I had learned and made it in just a nick of time. 1 second longer and the alert would have triggered, so this was really satisfying. While searching for Meryl, I found a new weapon, a remote-controlled rocket launcher. Sweet. I then entered a room where I would need it. I was sealed into a corridor with yet more toxic gas, and a codec call from Deep Throat told me that the floor is electrified. I would need to disable the power to escape. Gee, I wonder how I'm supposed to do that. So yeah, I just need to guide the missile to the power box by remote controlling it, which is cute. What's not so great is the control scheme. The missile handles like it's had a few too many bottles of Bordeaux, and I'm also being fired on by an assortment of turrets, and I've got limited time as well. Even when I made it to the room, I still couldn't find that damn power box. Undeterred though, I made it on attempt number, I want to say 7 or so, and with that, the corridor was now safe to traverse. Well, except for the gas, of course. With that craziness behind us, I entered the next area, but I started to hear creepy music and some really disturbing voices, so I knew something was about to go down. There was a brutal cutscene of that ninja from earlier going on a killing spree. I'm not going to show it all here, but it's nuts, dude. It's like something from Elfenlied. I complete one of my mission objectives and find Dr. Emmerich, but he's about to be murdered by the ninja. The ninja literally cuts a bullet in half and then challenges Snake to a fight. He says he's a neutral party who could die at peace if he duels with Snake. We also get this immortal line from the doc.
What's with these guys? It's like one of my Japanese animes.
Here we go, boss fight number 3, Cyber Ninja McGee. Since he uses stealth tech, I immediately figured out I would need my thermal goggles to see him. This still didn't mean I could do anything though, he could just cut through and dodge bullets. I know, I'll try punching, that's a neat trick. So simple enough, I figured out how to see and attack, so it's just a case of beating him in hand-to-hand combat as he throws his sword away to fight me mano a mano. This fight is long. He has a ton of health and melee attacks are very weak. Well, mine are anyway. His hit like a truck. There's also just a lot of downtime. We have to wait to attack him, so it's a bit dull and repetitive compared to the first two. Fortunately, I was fully stocked on rations, and I got progressively better at dodging his teleport attack, so after 8 minutes of slogging it out, I was able to take the dub. We get another absolutely bonkers cutscene of them fighting, with Snake ultimately coming out on top. After a bit of dialogue, Snake realizes he knows the ninja as Grey Fox from his past, but before learning more, Fox has a green zappy thing come out of him, and he starts to lose his mind. Having lost his humanity that he was just beginning to show, he lashes out in a blind rampage, destroying most of the lab. We get a very important codec call here, where Snake asks the Colonel and Naomi about Grey Fox, and Naomi says that Foxhound used him for secret gene therapy. This research conducted on Grey Fox is how the modern genome soldiers were created. This is also why Naomi left Foxhound before they revolted. We get the impression there's still more she won't tell us, but we'll find that out later. We're now properly introduced to a fan-favorite character. Dr. Emmerich was the chief engineer on Metal Gear, and he becomes one of Snake's best assets in stopping it. He's also a huge weeb, and he has the nickname Otacon as a contraction of Otaku Convention. He's just a good boy. He wasn't aware of the true purpose of Rex. Once he finds out about the stakes of nuclear war if Foxhound succeeds, he's willing to help us stop it. We get some vital details on Rex's weapons and capabilities. We also get more super pixelated real-life footage as they realize that the Arms Tech president, Kenneth Baker from earlier, bribed the DARPA chief and other key US officials to make Rex as the ultimate weapon in the nuclear arms race. This led to the situation that we find ourselves in now. One of the core themes of this game is the price of nuclear war, and I'm only giving it the cursory nod that I can in a video format like this. The last few details here are bullet point. We now know where Rex is being stored, where we can enter the override codes if we get them from Meryl, and that destroying Rex will be necessary regardless. Otacon takes the discarded stealth tech from Grey Fox and gives us his codec code to offer help from here on. You could even call him to have him sneak you supplies as an added bonus. Neat. Oh, a cute little detail to mention too is Mario and Yoshi are on the desk here. Since this is a GameCube game, there's other Easter eggs hidden throughout as well. With all that taken care of, I need to find Meryl, and then we're ready to enter the endgame of stopping Rex. I did have one little whoopsie though while I was trying to find her.
Why did you do it?
Oh no!
What happened?
I didn't see that coming. That's funny. Hey man, it's not my fault. She's dressed like every other generic henchman trying to kill me, alright? I eventually found her hiding in the bathroom, but she gets the drop on Snake, and that's not easy to do. We learn a little more about Foxhound. Snake and the Colonel were members years ago, and they were both retired before this game's plot forced them to enter the fight again. Foxhound is now what we see it as, a terrorist group helmed by genome soldiers. There's some pretty egregious fan service, but at least it's actually plot relevant, unlike the meme. After some more Snake-Meryl flirting action, we learn that she only has one of the 3 card keys, throwing a real spanner in the works. This sets our mission back to now needing to find the other 2 card keys and then stopping Metal Gear. This cutscene is seriously like 15 minutes long, so I'm skipping a ton of character development for Meryl. I'd strongly recommend a playthrough or watching the game like a movie on YouTube if you want all the extra context and nuance that I've had to skip. We also get a FAMAS assault rifle and level 5 security card from Meryl. This opens up some backtracking for high level supplies and gives me a much more powerful gun which I'll need as combat becomes more common from here. So, to take stock, we have now teamed up with Meryl, can contact Otacon if need be, and have our final objectives for the game. Find the 2 card keys and stop Metal Gear Rex. With that all in mind, it was time to head even further north and end this. But first, it's boss fight number 4, and possibly the most well known of any Metal Gear boss to those unfamiliar with the series like I was. Meryl has her mind seized by Psycho Mantis. After tricking Snake with a sexual advance, she aims her gun at him while Psycho Mantis tries to taunt us into killing her. A codec call from the Colonel warns us not to use our weapons to stop her. Let's see how that went.
Jesus, dude! What am I supposed to do?
What's wrong? Snake!
Doesn't seem very fair.
I was much more successful the second time though, since I was ready, and after a few melee combos, we knocked her out while keeping her alive. This forces Mantis to confront us directly, and leads to those 4th wall breaks I mentioned earlier as he begins to read our mind. He begins with observations from how you've played the game thus far, like calling me a poor warrior but good at evading traps. He then reads your memory card and other games that you've played, like he knew that I've played Smash Bros. Melee before. He also makes observations about your gaming habits, like saying that I save my games often and am a prudent person. It's true! He even has you put your controller down and moves it with psychokinetic powers, also known as the rumble feature. This is all too funny and it's just great flavor. There's a reason this fight is famous.
What do you think now? Can you feel my power? The demonstration is over.
This is pretty trippy.
Even during the fight itself, this keeps happening. He makes the screen go black like an old TV, and it says Hideo, much like they would say video back in the day. The main gimmick here is that since he is a psychic, he can read your mind and your attacks will never hit him. At first you cannot do anything but dodge his moves as he throws tons of furniture at you. By spamming codec calls to the Colonel, however, you can learn that he is reading your controller inputs and that by changing which slot you are plugged into, you can stop him from reading your mind. Amazing. Absolute cinema. This is probably the coolest part of the whole game, and there's a reason I knew of it before I even played it. It's a really fun concept, and it's executed beautifully. 10 out of 10, no notes. Even with the solution known, this fight's still really tough though. He throws a crazy amount of objects at you, and teleports and flies around the room ridiculously quickly. He also periodically can learn to read your mind again, meaning you'll need to call the Colonel and find out which controller slot to switch to next. Like the other bosses, he also has tons of health. Even a headshot doesn't do that much, so it's a pretty drawn out affair whittling him down. At half HP, he even repossessed Meryl, meaning I had to brawl with her again to continue the fight. I assume if you make the mistake of shooting her here, that's game over, and you need to do the whole thing again. I was fine though, I just slowly but surely chunked him down and dodged like a pro. After a good, solid, but deathless 8 minutes, I emerged victorious. I got a codec call to confirm that Meryl is now safe, and Naomi asks why Snake saved her. She infers that he is a heartless killer, and we get the impression that she is still not telling us everything. Mantis, during his final breath, says that he respects Snake, and as such, he tells us to get to the secret facility where Rex is stored, we'll need to go through a hidden door in his bookcase. He also gives a speech about how every creature is designed to mindlessly pass on its DNA. The other main theme of this game is about genetics. There is a lot of talk about our fates being bound to our genes, and the passing them on is all that matters. There'll be more on this later from Naomi and Liquid, but I thought it worth mentioning after we saw Grey Fox and this monologue. He also implies that Meryl has a large place in her heart for Snake and that it's only growing. She apologizes for letting Mantis control her, and Snake says to not regret your past but learn from it. There's an awkward moment over what Mantis said, but they brush it aside to proceed with their mission. Once we head through the bookcase, we hear wolves cry out, and that leads to this beautiful line from Snake.
I ride dog sleds. I'm a musher.
This area is quite tricky. It's full of big, scary doggos that I would really have preferred to avoid fighting. Unfortunately, they did not feel the same way. Unlike the soldiers we can typically avoid by staying out of sight or using a cheeky box, these guys can smell me, and once spotted, pursued relentlessly. As far as I can tell, they also spawn infinitely. Otacon begged me not to kill the doggos, and I really wouldn't have done if they just leave me alone. I called the master, as he is our animal expert, to see if he had any advice, but all he really did was give me some backstory on how wolf dogs were bred and warned me to be careful. Thanks. Eventually I made it through the hordes, and before I entered the next area, I saw this cute little papa running around. Now I feel like a true monster. He even gets a little love heart when he comes up to you. Sadly, Snake doesn't adopt him or say much about the situation. I'm sure there's something in there about the prevailing theme of species passing down their genes to new generations, though. Further ahead, there are even more mines to avoid, but this time my radar and mine detector have both been disabled. Meryl has some lingering effects from being possessed by Mantis, though, and can remember exactly where each mine was placed. Therefore, the puzzle here is to memorize her movement pattern and walk the same way that she does. There are still lingering footprints thanks to the snow, though, so this is very easy. With that out of the way, it's time to face our deadliest foe yet, a reactionary YouTuber. Meryl is sniped by an unseen assailant, and Snake is forced to seek cover, leaving her exposed but alive. Meryl tells Snake to run and save himself as the sniper is using her as bait. Even the Colonel tells you to flee, and that's his own niece. We're told that this is Foxhound's Sniper Wolf, one of the deadliest shooters in the world. To stop her, we will need a rifle of our own. We get more Naomi dialogue here, where she accuses Snake of having a murderous tendency written into his very DNA, and that saving somebody is not like him. We'll soon get the whole picture of what Naomi keeps hinting towards, and the main focal point of the game's themes around genetics. For now though, I need that sniper rifle, though I may have forgotten about the mines. So now it's a case of a huge backtrack to go get that rifle. I called Otacon since he knows the base better than anybody, and he says that there is a powerful rifle in the armory below the tank hangar. I can now access that since I have the upgraded security passes that we've collected throughout the game. That means we'll need to go almost back to the very start. Woo! And goddamn is this backtracking rough. Every area we've been through must be done in reverse, and often this is much trickier than the initial time through. This means getting through the nuke silo, the place where we fought Raven, but it also is now teeming with dudes, and any other location you've pretty much seen in the video thus far. This took a decent chunk of time due to some deaths and needing to rebuild my ammo and ration supplies after the last couple of boss fights. Eventually, I did make it back to the armory though, and I was ready to grab my new weapon. This is hard to do, as they have doubled the patrol since Liquid can predict my actions. Then there is an infrared laser guarding the rifle, so when I grabbed it, every guard was alerted. This meant lots and lots of combat, tearing through my provisions. I even had to bust down Nikita, that remote-controlled missile launcher, just to get through this huge wave of dudes. Eventually I did manage to wade through them all and escape though, so with my new weapon and supplies, we're ready to return. This of course means I had to go through all the same areas again, and fight all the guys again, and I died a bunch again. But after an hour's round trip, I returned with my sniper rifle and I was ready to confront Wolf. Thankfully, this Sniper Wolf doesn't dox you, but she does have cracked accuracy. It only takes a few shots for you to go down, as expected from a high caliber sniper rifle. I found my rifle really hard to use in this game. The sensitivity is through the roof, and it sways a fair amount. Perhaps because Snake isn't usually a sniper by trade. Similar to Ocelot, this is a case of tracking her and then shooting her before she can shoot you. Like all the other bosses on normal, her health bar is also really chunky, so this does take a while. Even my headshots do a cursory amount of damage, which seems kinda crazy. Nonetheless, I took her down, and like most bosses, she retreats for an upcoming round 2. In spite of my victory, before I can rescue Meryl, some special Foxhound agents get the drop on me. Snake beats them, but then Sniper Wolf gets a bead on him and forces him to surrender. Snake gets knocked out, and we hear Liquid say to not kill him as he wants no more accidents like the DARPA chief. We then get one of the most important cutscenes in the game. We finally meet Liquid face to face. Snake is trapped in a torture harness, and while I can look around, everything is very hazy and disorienting. We learn that Liquid wants Snake's DNA to correct his Genome Soldier's mutations, and will also need DNA from Big Boss. That's an important character in the series, but not one we're told much about here. We learn that Foxhound's whole purpose in seizing Shadow Moses Island and Rex was to ransom the US government for the remains of Big Boss and $1 billion. Liquid calls us his little brother, and just like the game's title implies, these are the twin snakes, Solid and Liquid. Both are clones of Big Boss, with Liquid believing that he got all of the recessive traits, making him inferior, hence his strong resentment towards us and Big Boss, with Solid Snake supposedly receiving all the dominant genes. As mentioned before, genetics is one of the core themes of this game, and the different ways in which the two snakes handle their birthright is very interesting. The last main bit of info we get here is that their demands are denied, and thus they will launch a nuclear strike with Rex in 10 hours. Liquid's very suspicious, saying that the Pentagon are acting strangely, and they must think that they still have the upper hand somehow. On a whim, Sniper Wolf has kept Meryl alive. She has a very sadistic obsession with Snake as her target, and there are several instances of her flirting with him in their interactions. Ocelot, on the other hand, says he needs to know what we know of the keycards, and as such, he's going to torture Snake to find out. We get some fourth wall breaking with Ocelot saying to try to keep my health above 50%. There are no continues here, and he'll know if I cheat with a turbo controller. This begins a mini-game of sorts. You need to button mash to keep your health up and survive increasingly brutal levels of shocks. It becomes really difficult, and I had to sweat a bit to succeed here. I didn't know at the time, but this was a key moment to determine the ending that I got. If I'd failed this, Meryl would have been killed and then would have been absent for the remainder of the game. I'm now imprisoned and have to find a way to escape. Snake finds the body of the DARPA chief, which is far too decomposed to have happened since we saw him die earlier. All of these mysteries will soon be solved. We're approaching the end of the story now, and I hope I've done a good job of making this possible to follow, as this narrative is very obtuse and complicated. A codec call here gives us more backstory. We learn that Naomi is being very secretive about her family and past. Snake recalls how he killed his father, Big Boss, 6 years ago, and that is why he left Foxhound. I'm fairly sure this is the plot covered in Metal Gear Solid 2, but I haven't played that series. This is also the same incident where Grey Fox, the ninja from earlier, was on the opposite side to Snake, thus leading to them fighting. Snake won that battle, and Fox was left for dead, which resulted in his capture and the genome testing by Foxhound. Naomi also mentions a lost older brother, who I can guess was Grey Fox, and she again accuses Snake of having murderous DNA. She clearly dislikes him. While I was searching my cell, Otacon used his stealth tech to visit Snake in prison. He gives us the level 6 security card. He also gave me a bottle of ketchup as he thought I might be hungry. Yum. Lastly, he gives me a handkerchief that belonged to Sniper Wolf. Apparently she was very nice to him. He obviously has a crush on her as well. The wolves won't attack anybody with her scent, and thus I am now safe when we encounter them. We have some more divergent gameplay here. There are multiple ways to escape this cell. I only know the one that I used. If you play this yourself, it might be cool to find one of the other methods. I think there's at least 4. You could use the codec to call various characters, and some will give you advice that might help you work out one of those solutions. I decided to use the ketchup from Otacon to look like blood and trick the guards into thinking that I was dead. However, my first attempt was a bit of a fiasco. Oh.
What are you playing around with that ketchup for?
Second time though, I sprayed it on the floor and I went prone, and that was enough to trick the guard into entering the cell so I could overpower him and dip. I retrieved my supplies, and thus I was ready to find Meryl and finally get back to stopping Rex before it's too late. I now needed to go back to where we fought Sniper Wolf again, but on my way I received another call from Deep Throat, and he told me there's a bomb planted inside my item bag and I need to throw it away or I'll die. A bit of fourth wall breaking from the Colonel here tells me how to dispose of it. I managed to throw it away with little time to spare, and then I finished progressing back to where Meryl was last seen. Of course, this time all the puppers are my friends, thanks to the hanky, and that makes me very happy. Once I reach where Meryl was shot, Snake has some flashbacks about their time together thus far. He begins to have some doubts as he failed to protect her, but several of the codec casts tell him to forgive himself and save her now, so let's do that. One thing just to mention here is that I was beginning to notice the Master has a very similar voice to Liquid. He's been listening on some of my codec calls as well. If you look really closely, there are also some instances where his portrait changes throughout the game, and he looks more like Liquid. I now needed to switch to Disc 2, as this is a very big game, and I'm going to try and push through the remainder a little bit quicker, as I think I've explained enough for everything to make sense from here. These final few areas of the game have a ton of combat. With all the backtracking, a huge amount of the remaining playtime came down to fighting, sneaking, deaths, and supply runs. So I'll only be showing snippets of this. Just a reminder though, anytime you see the timer jump ahead, that's probably why. After climbing a huge comms tower and battling like 20 soldiers, I made it to the roof, and now this is where the game goes off the chain. Liquid appears piloting the Hind that we saw right at the game's beginning and starts pelting Snake with missiles and gunfire. Fortunately, throughout my travels scouring for items, I found a rope. This lets me rappel off the side and try to escape. I assume if you don't have the rope when you get here, you're just cooked, but let me know in the comments if there are other methods to beat this section. Rappelling involves running horizontally across the building, jumping back with A to make huge descents, and you can also slide down and climb up the rope where needed. All of this is while Liquid pelts me with bullets, and the controls are also a bit clunky as well. Nonetheless, I made it to safety, well-ish, down the tower, and I could proceed with the mission. I'd like to quickly mention the voice acting in this game, as I haven't specifically mentioned it yet, and it absolutely deserves it. This is a controversial topic, as many prefer the original PS1 version to the total redub of Twin Snakes. I personally have no reference for the difference, and I love the Twin Snakes voice cast. You of course have David Hayter for Snake, and a slew of other talented cast members turning in amazing performances. I'm going to include a short compilation here of an assortment of characters, and remember that there are tens of thousands of lines throughout.
Is this the first time you ever pointed a gun at a person? Your hands are shaking. Can you shoot me, rookie?
Careful. I'm no rookie.
Liar. Your eyes wander. There's no confidence in them. The eyes of a rookie.
Destroying his spirit is more important than destroying his body.
Don't let him read you. Be a blank slate, okay? Clear your mind. Right. Touch that wire and the C4 will blow up along with the old man. So you're the one that the boss keeps talking about.
And you?
Snakes don't belong in Alaska. I will not let you pass. I've been waiting for you, Snake.
Who are you?
Neither enemy nor friend. I see that you enjoy Nintendo games. You like action games? Oh, so you've played Super Smash Bros. Melee before.
I am Sniper Wolf, and I always kill what I aim at.
What are you going to do? Take on a hind with your bare hands? Now you're mine!
So yeah, amazing stuff. Back to beating the game though. I need to return to the roof to fight Liquid in the Hind, and to do that I needed to scale yet another tower. There were some puzzles on this one, but I'm not going to be going through those in detail. It took some exploring and experimenting to work out how to activate the elevator back to the roof, but once I found my way there, it was boss time. Funnily enough, I found this fight much easier than Raven in the tank. I was given a Stinger missile launcher with a stupid amount of ammo, so it's as simple as keeping track of where he's flying to, getting missile lock, and then chipping away at his huge health pool. Once I finished him off, we got a truly next level cutscene when it comes to nonsense.
Damn! Eat this!
Oh my god. Oh, that's classic.
A codec call tells us that Liquid must be dead, but Snake is unconvinced. So now it's a case of continuing my path of destruction through a ceaseless rain of soldiers and bosses whilst I search for Meryl and the card keys to beat Rex. One big controversy about this game is the over-the-top nature of it. If I understand correctly, the original Metal Gear was far more subdued than this remake in both voice acting and cutscene craziness. That's one of the main reasons this game is very love-hate among the fan base. I myself, only having played this one, love the over-the-top nature of it, and Kojima himself wanted to make the game more fantastical using the increased technology of the Gamecube. Straight into another boss fight now. This time, it's round 2 with Sniper Wolf. Otacon begs Snake not to kill her, but Wolf hacks the comms midway and says that she will not relent until one of them is dead. I know who gets my vote. This is the exact same boss fight as the last time, except it's a larger area, and since she's wearing white, it's a little bit harder to see her. But now that I was used to the sniper rifle's handling, this was a doddle. Even more cutscene shenanigans now. This time she shoots my rifle out of my hands and prepares to finish Snake off. He then does an insane backflip, rearms himself, then they both shoot with Snake coming out on top. The cutscene of her dying is very emotional. She gives us some of her backstory, and like so many other things in this game, I would strongly recommend playing it yourself if you want all the nuance and details of each boss and character. Otacon arrives to mourn her, and at her request hands her her sniper rifle to hold while Snake mercy kills her and the wolves lament. There's a ton of depth and character growth to Snake shown throughout this journey. His displays of mercy and kindness are often contrasted with Naomi's increasing insistence that he is genetically evil and thus cannot be a good person. We're in the final few areas of the game now. First, there's a large blast furnace that's built above the bunker that stores Rex. Of course, there's a ton of stealth and combat to engage in as I make my way through the facility. There was also a mini-boss fight on the cargo elevator. I needed to descend this while Snake was ambushed by special forces. This fight is a video game staple, a large group of dudes on a moving platform. Thankfully by now though, I was armed to the teeth and so used to combat that I made light work of these guys and could proceed further. Snake gets a codec call from the Master, who as I mentioned earlier sounds similar to Liquid, and you can see for the portrait he looks similar to him as well. The Master tries to convince Snake that Naomi is a spy and that the backstory she's been giving me through codec calls during the game is all a fabrication. He accuses her of also working with the Cyber Ninja and tells Snake to not trust her. For now though, I have bigger fish to fry. There are ravens harassing me, and you can probably guess what that means. Yet another boss fight. They come thick and fast on disc 2, I'll tell you that much. This is one of the last though, as we're super close to beating this game. This time, it's Vulcan Raven number 2, and while he might not have a tank, he has a ridiculous Gatling gun and infinite ammo. This fight is pretty tough. We're battling amongst a large group of storage containers, and Raven meanders through them in what I can only guess is a random pattern. If you get too close to him, he'll notice and he'll tear you to ribbons with his giant weapon, so it's a case of trying to sneak behind him and take some shots before retreating again. I think this took me more attempts than any other boss in the game. I tried a ton of methods, including controlling missiles, hit and run, trying to line up grenades of where he was walking. The random nature of his roaming is what really made this tricky, since you just cannot figure out the pattern. It was fun trying to crack this though. Eventually I got on the God Run, and through some very well thrown grenades, managed to whittle him down. Phew. This game reminds me a bit of One Piece, where the villains seem very one-dimensional, but when you defeat them, you get backstory and context that makes you sympathize with them, or at least understand their motivations. I haven't covered much of that here, but the wiki goes into a lot of details for each character. Vulcan gave me the very highest level of security clearance. He also gave critical information. As expected, the DARPA chief that we saw die was a fake. It was actually another Foxhound member called Decoy Octopus, a deceptionist so cunning that he even takes his victim's blood into himself to make the perfect disguise. We almost have every puzzle piece that we need to solve the mystery of what killed Octopus and the Arms Tech Prez, and the last bit is just about to be revealed. A codec call between Snake, the Colonel, and Master Miller suggests that Naomi is a spy working for Foxhound. The Colonel says if that's the case, we're in big trouble. Master fishes for info on what Naomi may have been briefed on, in case there's vital secrets related to the DARPA chief and Arms Tech president. The Colonel is acting very evasive and is quickly losing Snake's trust, but before we can get those last few secrets, there is more progress to be made. I can finally see Rex, but I still don't know how to stop it. There's also now many environmental hazards to beware, as opposed to just soldiers. When I reached Rex, I had to climb a large scaffold around it, and Otacon gives backstory on the project and just how powerful and unstoppable the weapon would become if it isn't destroyed. We see Liquid and Ocelot in the control room, and Ocelot says that he has entered the PAL codes and they're ready to launch. Without too much detail, Liquid is now going to attack China with Rex and force a global arms race. Then the president will have to give in to his demands for Big Boss's remains and the money. He also mentions wanting a vaccine for Fox Die as part of the deal. Ocelot says that the Fox Die virus is what really killed Octopus and Kenneth Baker, and that Mantis was immune because of his gas mark. This is the first mention of Fox Die, but that is the final puzzle piece we were missing to understand the events that have been occurring. This is a long-ass cutscene. Liquid says he will pretend to team up with Russia to get what he wants. Then with Big Boss's remains, he can revive Big Boss's plans and create Outer Heaven. I don't know what that means exactly, as it's likely explored more in the sequel games. For now though, Ocelot mentions that if the PAL codes were re-entered, the nukes could be deactivated. But Liquid says that is not an issue, as the DARPA chief and Arms Tech presidents are already dead. We also learn that they're keeping Meryl alive as a final ace in the hole against Snake. Otacon follows up what I just learned by saying that the device that we will use to deactivate the nukes is the same one that activates them, and it can only be used once. If your eyebrow is twitching, you might have a sense of where this is going, but we'll get there. We also learned that there being 3 card keys was a lie. There's actually only the one, which I already have. It's made from a special alloy that changes shape at different temperatures. Don't question it, alright? That means I have everything I need to complete my mission and deactivate Rex. I need to access the terminal 3 times with the key and its 3 different temperature-bound shapes to deactivate the warheads. If that sounds convoluted, that's because it is. In case that wasn't enough, Ocelot notices me and he shoots the key out of Snake's hand, which causes it to fall into the drainage ditch below. So now I need to retrieve that before I can do anything else. With all of that in front of us, this is the final puzzle of the game, and then it's the final boss. Retrieve the key, change its shape, and input it into the console each time. First I had to climb all the way back down the scaffold, which is huge. Then I took a dip in some very radioactive water to try and find the key. I couldn't find it at first, but I asked the Colonel and he said to use my mine detector. With that knowledge, it was simple enough. I retrieved the POW key, and I was ready to deactivate the system. So it was all the way back up again to the control room. Every time you do a key, it's all the way up and all the way down.
Ah, my old enemy. Stairs.
I used the room temperature version of the key on the first slot, and that meant one of the 3 codes was entered. The next display was blue, so I guessed I would need to make the key cold. This obviously meant heading to the cold storage facility, where we battled Raven, so of course even more backtracking through waves of enemies. At first I thought perhaps I had it wrong, because nothing was happening to the key. Turns out it takes 2 minutes of real time for it to change, so we just chilled. Once the key turned blue, it was time to run all the way back to the control room, which I'll spare you from seeing. But that was the second code done. The final monitor was red, so it was time to go to someplace that's hot. This of course meant one final round of backtracking all the way to the blast furnace. This isn't a great bit of the game in my opinion, it's very padded and it's not especially fun, but we're basically end, so it is what it is. On my way I received another call from the master and he asked if I knew about Fox Die. He says it was developed by the Pentagon and it's what killed the DARPA chief and Arms Tech president. He says it's some sort of experimental DNA-based weapon and that Naomi was its creator. When pressed for details, the Colonel says Naomi has been arrested for sending coded messages to Shadow Moses, and therefore she must be working with the terrorists. The Master doesn't care about Naomi at all, he's just obsessed with the existence of a vaccine for the virus. He also says that Snake was infected by Naomi before the mission, when she gave him an injection to shield him from the Alaskan weather. Regardless, Snake decides to trust his old friend, the Colonel, and finish the mission. I battled back to the blast furnace and once again waited for several minutes of real time. Eventually the key turned red and it was time to input the POW code. During my final stair climb, Naomi contacted Snake through a stolen codec. She confirms that she is not really Naomi as we know her, but not everything she said was a lie. We get some of her real backstory and it's very different to what we were told throughout the playthrough until now. She confirmed my suspicions that Snake's old friend, Frank Yeager, or Grey Fox, was her big brother. Both Naomi and Frank had been taken in by Big Boss when they were younger, so after Snake killed Big Boss and Grey Fox 6 years ago, Naomi lost everything and vowed to get revenge. We get the final details on Fox Die here. It's a retrovirus that only kills specific targets coded by their DNA. The Pentagon used Snake as a carrier onto Shadow Moses, and it was coded to kill Kenneth Baker and all of Foxhound, hence the deaths of Decoy Octopus and the Armstech president after coming into contact directly with Snake. Furthermore, Naomi secretly re-engineered the virus to make Snake also a target. The Pentagon found out, and that's why she was arrested. The Colonel has been forced to claim it was her being a spy to prevent Snake from realizing the Pentagon's real reasons for sending him to the island, to wipe out Foxhound by spreading the virus, and that Fox Die is the reason the US would not give in to Liquid's demands, since he would soon be dead anyway. For now, all I can do though is finish the mission. I entered the third and final code, however...
Detonation code activated. Ready for launch.
The Master calls us and finally drops the act that he's been helping. As you may have guessed earlier, since we had the only key and it can only be used once, the warheads were never actually armed. Liquid tricked us into thinking he had already activated them so that we would inadvertently do so when we tried to disarm them. Dun dun dun. The Colonel says that he has discovered the real Miller was killed before this game's events, and Liquid finally reveals that he has been playing Snake for a fool this whole time. Well, duh. Everything was part of his plan, except for Fox Die killing Octopus disguised as the DARPA chief. With that, my old friend Poison Gas is back to finish Snake off now that he's served his purpose. I could not find a way out of this room, and I died a few times while I looked. In the end, I codec called the Colonel, and he told me that Otacon may be able to help me. The glass is bulletproof, and that means I cannot break my way out, but if you could survive long enough through rations and things, Otacon will hack the security system and open the door to free you. It is now time for the proper confrontation with Liquid. There is a stupidly long cutscene where Liquid monologues about the events of the game thus far, and he makes it painfully clear to anybody not paying attention that our mission was all a ruse. We were tricked into being used as a vector to spread Fox Die. He says we were inadvertently successful in our real mission, and we have spread Fox Die to all of Foxhound, including him. But both the Snakes and Ocelot have somehow survived this long. Liquid says since he is genetically identical to Snake, he is not worried about the virus just yet. Lots of backstory here on how the Snakes came to be, and again Liquid states that Snake is lucky to gain all the dominant genes while he was left with the recessive and is nothing more than a leftover. He believes the Big Boss chose him to carry on his legacy and vows to surpass the boss and dominate the entire planet. And with that, he enters Metal Gear Rex and prepares to launch the nuke at China to put his true objectives into motion. Of course, that means we will need to stop him, so it's finally time for the Battle of the Twin Snakes. This fight is bonkers. I mean, I'm fighting a giant robot the size of a building, for crying out loud. A series of codec conversations instruct me that Metal Gear is impregnable. I need to destroy the sensors that it uses for its radar, and that will force Liquid to open the cockpit, exposing him. He batters me with his railgun and rockets, and unsurprisingly, those hurt. He'll also just straight up stomp on you if you get too close, and that's a one-shot. After a great deal of dancing and some careful use of the stinger, I managed to complete Phase 1, and I destroyed most of the sensors.
Nice try, Snake!
It's all about presentation, Macaroni. It's very important.
So, our old friend Grey Fox or Frank Yeager saved us because he says he wanted Snake to kill him. He needs to be set free from the tortured life that he has endured. We also learned that he and Naomi were not truly related. He in fact killed her parents on a mission, but he could not bear to kill her too, and thus took her in to hide the truth. He asks us to tell Naomi the truth, and in one final act, he will buy us an opening. This cutscene is friggin' insane, and definitely worth watching on YouTube. The result is Fox being crushed by Rex while Liquid brags. He uses some crazy laser weapon to finish damaging the sensors, and this forces Liquid to finally open the hatch and expose himself. Fox tells Snake to fire the stinger and finish them both. I then return to having control, and while I can aim the stinger at the cockpit, Snake just cannot bring himself to shoot his old friend. As a result, Liquid finishes Fox off himself, but with his dying breath, Yeager bids his friend farewell. Liquid now goes all out, firing every weapon he has, but all I need to do is lock on one stinger onto the cockpit and shoot. After some dodging, careful aiming, it was time to finish him. There's another cutscene where Rex is finally destroyed, but Snake is hit in the resulting explosion. Somehow Liquid survived unscathed, and we see him walking towards us. This leads to even more cutscenes. Seriously, the ending section is 95% cutscene, so I'm trying to make this as concise as I can. Liquid has a huge monologue about his objectives and how he sees the world. He accuses Solid of being just as bloodthirsty as he is, similar to how Meryl says that they both have genes that predispose them to murder. He explains that both snakes were created from a program designed to spawn the most powerful soldier possible from the DNA of Big Boss, as he was the deadliest fighter to ever live. There were in fact octuplets originally created by the program, but only the two of them were allowed to survive to make them even stronger. Again, a ton of this game's theme revolves around genetics, and this speech covers a great deal of that messaging. Of all the genome soldiers created, only Liquid and Solid were successes. All the others are doomed to die, and that's why Big Boss's DNA is needed from the Pentagon to save and perfect the brothers and sisters. The final lines revolve around Liquid believing that our genes control our fate, that he and Snake are fated to be murderers with no escape, and thus he will fulfill his destiny and kill Solid Snake. We're also shown that he still has Meryl held captive, and he mocks her for falling in love with Snake, who he says is incapable of love. To make matters worse, the Pentagon have launched bombers at the island, even though we stopped Metal Gear. They want to cover it up and Fox die, and will nuke the island to do so. This is all under the orders of the Secretary of Defense, who arrested Campbell for trying to warn us. He says that the Twin Snakes are relics from a bygone era, and good riddance. With that 30+ minute cutscene done, Liquid frees us and challenges Snake to one last fight. We must do hand-to-hand combat on top of the remains of Metal Gear. The loser will fall from a height that Liquid says even Solid with his dominant genes could not survive. In addition, there is a bomb next to Meryl, and you can see the countdown at the top right, so I need to beat him and save her before time runs out. God damn, this game is crazy. The fight itself is trivial though, just melee combo him and he can't do much in return. It did not take very long to win this. It's a little anticlimactic after the giant mecha. In a cutscene, Snake finally beats Liquid, he uppercuts him off the wreckage for good measure. Get him out of there, dude. We rescue Meryl, and they have a very touching reunion. She more or less confesses her love, and just as they're about to kiss, we get a poorly timed codec call. Otacon, being the bro that he is, has found us a hidden way out of the facility, but we need to reach her before the bombers can arrive. After a few hours of being shirtless, Snake finally recovers his full suit for the last mission, escape the island. Nearly there, dudes, let's go. We're led to a hangar filled with armored vehicles, and it's time to essentially play Halo 3. I get infinite ammo to defend us while Otacon opens the doors, and Meryl's going to be our escape driver. I had to survive for quite a long time here. It's very overwhelming, so you have to have solid aim. Eventually though, the door opens, and it's time to flee. We get a cutscene to show us the Liquid is still chasing us. Jesus, dude, how many times do I have to kill this man? Meryl does the driving, so my job is just to light this mother up and keep shooting him as much as possible. I don't know if you can fail this section, but it did not take me long to drain his health bar. There's some more crazy cutscenes showing that Snake wins the gunfight, and then Liquid careens out of control towards the cliff edge. He is still alive? He prepares to kill Snake since we're unarmed, but before he can, Fox Die finally activates, and after about 5 times, he's finally dead. Nope, still going. Oh wait. Actually dead? For real? Good. Aye, aye, aye. Snake realizes the Fox Die implications of Liquid dying, but he's interrupted by a call from the Colonel. The Secretary of Defense has been arrested. He was actually the one behind Metal Gear, the cover-up, and every shady thing the Pentagon has done this game. The Colonel has called off the bombers, meaning that we're safe. He thanks Snake for his deeds, and the two friends say farewell for now. There's also a snowmobile waiting for us nearby. A final call from Naomi says that she has learned the truth about her brother, and Snake tells her his dying words. Snake asks if Liquid's death means Fox Die is going to kill him. Naomi says it will, but it's not about how much time we have left, it's about how we use it. Like Liquid, she thought that each person's fate was written into their genetic code, but Solid Snake has helped her see that you cannot be ruled by your genes. Humans can choose who they want to be and the kind of life that they will live. She says that she will choose to truly live now and encourages Snake to do the same. She has realized that she was wrong about him and how she saw the world. This whole speech is beautiful, and I can't do it justice here, but after the journey I had, it was very moving. Snake and Meryl talk about life and the future, and Snake resolves to live. Just to live.
So, where to, Snake?
David. My name is David.
Write that down, write that down.
Okay, so where to, Dave?
I think it's time we look for a new path in life.
A new path?
A new purpose.
Will we find it?
We'll find it. I know we'll find it.
With a new lease on life and a sparking relationship, the two drive off, concluding our playthrough. There is a post-credit dialogue where we learn Ocelot received the Fox Die vaccine and is still alive. He retrieved the dummy warhead data from Rex and has been secretly working for a third unseen Snake called Solidus this whole time. Dun 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 dun. He also states that Liquid was wrong about him and Solid. Liquid had the dominant genes all along, hence being nigh unkillable. It's also why Fox Die killed him first. This plays into the theme of how he let his misgivings about his genes control and ruin his life, while Solid, the recessive twin, focused on what matters and didn't give in to the ideas of fate and determinism. For the two of you that made it to the end, I really hope I did a good job with this video. Like Killer 7, the story is incredibly dense and obtuse, and I want these videos to give as much of the full experience as they can. So it's important to me that you have the context to understand what is happening and why. But yeah, that concludes the Twin Snakes. Honestly, way more fun than I anticipated it being, and one of the few games so far that I was sad to say goodbye to. It took me a grand total of 13 hours and 42 minutes to beat this one, making it the longest game in the challenge to date. I scored this an 8 for difficulty. I found plenty of sections challenging, and with it being my first experience of the franchise, it did take me quite a while to hit my stride with the stealth mechanics. Enjoyment suffered a bit due to some of the padding and backtracking, but I still scored it a 7. Despite some frustrations at times, it was an enjoyable level of difficulty, and the game is just very charming in its absurdity. Thank you for making it to the end. Please enjoy a sneak peek at what I'll be playing next time.
Here we go. Rocky. Is that like the movie?
So there it is. Game 14 is a GameCube tie-in for the movie Rocky. Will I become the heavyweight champ? Find out next time. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing as they help the channel grow, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye-bye.